Indeed, many people were not satisfied with the performance of EVERNIGHT in V1. Perhaps it's because she is a character with a rather specific role, only being useful within Castorice team compositions. But if you look at her damage output and the amount of crit damage buff she provides, EVERNIGHT is actually very satisfying as both a support and a sub DPS in the team. Now that V3 is here, has EVERNIGHT's kit gone through any significant changes? And in this update, does she still remain a support and secondary DPS that only works in certain team compositions? For those of you who don't know or are still not familiar with EVERNIGHT's V3 changes, then you are in the right video, because in this video I will explain all the changes to her kit, while also giving a bit of analysis about EVERNIGHT. So without further ado, let's get into it. The Evil March or EVERNIGHT is a limited 5-star ice character who follows the path of remembrance. She is a unit designed to act as a sub DPS within a team, and she can potentially shine the most in lineups that include multiple remembrance characters. This is because one of her passive increases the crit damage of Memo Sprites for the entire team, with the bonus scaling higher the more remembrance units are present. All of EVERNIGHT's attacks scales off her HP, and she also drains her own HP whenever she uses a skill. Her Memo Sprite has its own separate turn with a fixed speed, and it performs small attacks that deal cheap damage whenever its turns come up. EVERNIGHT's main source of damage comes from building stacks a resource called Memoria, which she can gain through various means, including whenever she or her Memo Sprite loses HP. Once her Memoria stacks exceeds a certain threshold, EVERNIGHT can unleash a powerful nuke attack. Her base HP is around 1300 with a base speed of 99. As for bonus stats gained from leveling up, she receives crit rate, HP, and crit damage. The first change comes from her talent. As we all know, at the start of the battle, Evie, the Memo Sprite, will automatically be summoned. Previously, Evie inherited 100% of EVERNIGHT's max HP and had a base speed of 160. But with this update, she now only inherits half of EVERNIGHT's HP. This doesn't just lower her damage output, but it also slows down the charging of Castorice's ultimate. Aside from that, the rest of the talent's description remains the same. Although Evie's HP was drastically reduced, some of her talents were adjusted to prevent her personal damage from falling off too much. Evie can perform a single target attack on her turn, and the multiplier of this attack has been increased from 20% of her max HP to 50%. On top of that, for every 4 Memoria stacks EVERNIGHT holds, the damage multiplier increases by additional of 10% of Evie's max HP. And just like before, she still grants EVERNIGHT 1 Memoria whenever she uses this ability. Another talent change slightly reduced her synergy with Castorice. Previously, when Evie was first summoned at the start of the battle, she would restore EVERNIGHT's HP. Now that effect has been removed, and instead, Evie only immediately takes action. This is the second reason why EVERNIGHT is now less efficient in helping speed up Castorice's ultimate charging in this patch. We all also know that EVERNIGHT's ultimate has a very high energy cost, which means she needs reliable energy recovery. Unfortunately, one of her previous Memo talents that restored 30 energy to EVERNIGHT when Evie explodes has been removed. It has been replaced with a speed boost instead. Now when Evie disappears from battle, EVERNIGHT gains a 10% speed increase. Additionally, if Evie vanishes after using enhanced skill or exploding, EVERNIGHT gains extra 1% speed for each Memoria consumed. However, this speed boost only lasts until EVERNIGHT's next turn. After Evie's max HP was cut by 50%, I personally feel that the personal damage increase in her talent alone is not enough to maximize the damage potential of either EVERNIGHT or Evie. That's why her enhanced Memo skill, where Evie attacks and then self-destructs while consuming all Memoria stacks, received a buff. Previously, for each Memoria stack, she would only deal 5% of her max HP to the main target and 2.5% to surrounding enemies. But now, with the update, the multiplier has been increased to 12% for the main target and 6% for the others per Memoria stack consumed. However, the third reason why Castorice's ultimate charging is now less efficient comes from EVERNIGHT's skill. When summoning Evie, she now consumes only 10% of her max HP instead of 12%. But this change was somewhat compensated by increasing the buff to all allied Memo Sprites, raising their crit damage bonus from 40% to 60%. EVERNIGHT's personal damage boost in this patch can also be seen in her ultimate. Previously, it deals AoE damage scaling off 120% of her max HP, but now the multiplier has been increased to 200%. In addition, the vulnerability effect applied when EVERNIGHT enters Darkest Riddle has also been enhanced, making enemies take 24% increased damage taken. Now let's move on to the changes made to her traces and technique. Aside from having strong damage and crit damage boosts from her kit, EVERNIGHT is further supported by her first trace, which helps balance out her crit rate and make character building much easier. With this unlock, she gains additional 35% crit rate, allowing her damage to become much more consistent. Since her Memo talent no longer restores 30 energy when EV disappears, her second trace is designed to compensate for that loss. At the start of the battle, EVERNIGHT immediately recovers 70 energy, but only gains 1 memory stacks. There's also a new effect. Whenever an ally Memo Sprite attacks, EVERNIGHT restores 5 energy. Because of this, I feel Hyacinth becomes almost mandatory in her team, considering how often Little Ika can attack once Hyacinth activates her ultimate. Her third trace also further strengthens her damage potential, as when you manage to form a full Remembrance team, the crit damage granted to all Memo Sprites can reach up to 65%. Even if you run EVERNIGHT as the hypercarry with RMC, 3B and Hyacinth, you still get 50% crit damage, which is the maximum value from the previous version, which in my opinion is still more than solid. As for her eidolons, EVERNIGHT does not see many changes. The main difference lies in her 6th eidolon, where when EV self-destructs, EVERNIGHT now regains 40% of the consumed memory stacks, instead of 30%. With these changes, several conclusions can be drawn. EVERNIGHT remains a character who is only functional within Remembrance-based teams. She still synergizes very well with Castorice, but in this version, her ability to accelerate Castorice's ultimate charging has become less efficient due to EV's significant HP reduction and the removal of EVERNIGHT's self-healing. Still, the two work well together. On the other hand, EVERNIGHT's personal damage increase also makes hypercarry team composition more realistic, even without Castorice. The situation feels quite similar to Anaxia, who was once considered just a support and sub DPS for Herta, but in reality, most of his potential shines in the hypercarry setup. Before diving into her signature light cone changes, let's quickly recap her eidolons and identify which one is the best to invest in. Eidolon 1 gives a massive damage boost in a single target scenarios, potentially great not only for herself, but also for Little Ika and of course Castorice and her dragon. Eidolon 2 makes memory stacks generation smoother and allows EVERNIGHT to stay in Darkest Riddle longer, meaning both she and her team will deal significantly more damage, thanks to enemies being exposed to vulnerability for a longer period. Eidolon 4 is still not really worth investing in, as its buff only focuses on weakness break efficiency. Eidolon 6 increases all type rest span for the entire team by 20% and restores 40% of memory stacks consumed when EV uses her enhanced skill. So for now, EVERNIGHT's base eidolon is still at eidolon 1. It not only provides a huge damage boost in single target scenarios, but also helps cover up her reduced efficiency in supporting Castorice's ultimate charging. The user of this light cone will gain additional 30% max HP. After the user's Memo Sprite attacks, they will gain the Noctis effect. This effect allows all allied Memo Sprites to ignore 20% of enemy's defense. Not only that, but the new effect from this light cone also increases the user's damage dealt by 30%. When the user Memo Sprites disappears, they also restores 8 energy. So in a way, EVERNIGHT's ability to generate her ultimate has now been shifted over to her teammates' Memo Sprites and this LC, making it possible to maintain more consistent ultimate activations. And that wraps up the kit changes EVERNIGHT received. So what do you guys think? Are you satisfied with her V3 update? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. With all these changes, we can definitely conclude that EVERNIGHT's personal damage has increased. But here's the question. Is it really enough for her to form her very own hypercarry team? For those of you who don't have Castorice, should you rejoice knowing that EVERNIGHT can now stand as the main DPS on her own? Or does she still heavily rely on her signature LC or even her eidolons to reach that level? In this case, I tested EVERNIGHT as the main DPS, fully equipped with her signature. The team members consist of 3B with S5 DDD, RMC, and E0 S1 Hyacinth. The difference between EVERNIGHT using her signature LC versus S5 the story's next page is quite significant, around 23%. And then I tested with S5 the flower remembers. The difference is even bigger, reaching up to 24%. Meanwhile, using E0S1 EVERNIGHT with the same team but without Hyacinth's signature LC shows about 6% difference. And keep in mind, Hyacinth's LC does not just boost damage, it also helps speed up EVERNIGHT's memory as text generation, something that has now become less consistent after the rework. But wait, what about her first eidolon? Even if you don't have her signature LC, can E1 make up for it? The difference between E0S1 and E1 is 0 is roughly around 17%. So yes, overall E1 does look stronger. This benefit can also be felt by her teammates, like Castorice, even when you're not building EVERNIGHT as the main carry. But remember, this eidolon shines the most in single target scenarios, meaning its effectiveness is not always consistent. And of course, it's generally cheaper to go for a light cone than for a duplicate character. So when deciding which to invest in, the choice will always be yours. EVERNIGHT can definitely function as a great hypercarry, but only if you have her signature light cone to maximize her potential, and with Hyacinth being a mandatory piece in her team. You can still aim for E1 instead if you are not planning to pull for her light cone, but the main key will always be Hyacinth and even her signature LC. Looking at some showcase on YouTube and other platforms, many players are choosing Bone Collection over Arcadia. The reason is simple. EVERNIGHT's Memo Sprite does not stay on the field consistently due to its self-destruct mechanic, meaning the Arcadia passive usually only grants 2 buffs at most, with RMC and Hyacinth's Memo Sprites, plus 3B taking up a slot without one. Arcadia's passive just does not reach its full potential. On the other hand, the buffs from Bone Collector remain much more consistent, especially since its HP scaling does not get oversaturated. So that's the rundown of EVERNIGHT's kit changes in V3 along with my short analysis. What do you guys think? Are you satisfied with these updates, or do you feel like more changes are still needed in future versions? And if this really is the final version of her kit, would you pull for EVERNIGHT and why? Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button and turn on notifications as well. Because up next, we are going to cover the changes to Danheng PT, which, from what I have heard, he is pretty disappointing right now. Stay safe, stay happy, and I will see you guys in the next one.